Every single thing that needs to be done in my business lives in ClickUp. One of the ways I explain what I do is that I help people turn ClickUp into their business instruction manual. And I would say that for myself, that's very much what's happening in ClickUp. It's where we're doing our weekly scrums. It's where we're keeping track of all of our processes. But most importantly, every single task that's in there, whether it's one time or recurring, it has a process attached to it. And if it doesn't have a process, it has a task saying create the process for it.
What happens when you fully commit to something in your business? When you are completely, totally, 100% all in? I'm Susan Bowles, and you're listening to Break the Ceiling, the show where we break down unconventional strategies you can use to save time, boost your profit, and increase your operational capacity. On the last few shows, we've been talking about no-code tools and the different ways you can use them in your business to streamline and automate internal processes and enhance your communication with your clients. You can use no-code tools to build digital products, help your students learn more effectively, and to diversify your revenue streams. Some of the no-code tools out there are so flexible and capable that you can actually run your entire business pretty much end-to-end on them. Today, I'm going to talk to Layla Pomper, the founder of Process Driven. You might recognize Layla from the Notion versus ClickUp episode earlier this year. Well, Layla is all in with ClickUp, which is an extremely flexible, no-code project management platform that we both use in our businesses. But Layla has taken her commitment to ClickUp to the next level. She uses it to bring in new clients by using it as her opt-in and the topic of her YouTube channel. She uses it to communicate and manage her one-on-one clients. She uses it to manage her own team and all of Process Driven's operations. She even now has a small group learning program all about how to use ClickUp more effectively. She went all in. And it's paid big dividends for her business and her clients. Layla and I are going to get into all the details about how she's using ClickUp everywhere in her business, the impact she's seen, and how to get the most out of the no-code tools that you're using in your business. Hey, Layla, thanks for coming back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really fun. And I know both of us really love geeking out on ClickUp. So here we go. So you have really gone all in on kind of a single no-code tool for your business, ClickUp, which is one of our favorite softwares. And you're using that in a lot of different ways. So kind of give me the high-level overview of all of the different places you're using it. And then we could talk about the specific details of each area.
Ooh, okay. So I was thinking about this question, and you know how the whole phrase, like the cobbler's kid has no shoes? I'm like the cobbler's kid that has like a whole shoe collection. So
I love that, and I feel every bit of that.
I use ClickUp for so many things that I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it for, just because I want to experiment. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. But right now I'm using ClickUp for an opt-in. So I have free ClickUp stuff as an opt-in. I use ClickUp as the topic for my YouTube channel. A lot of the videos that come out, I use ClickUp to manage my clients. I use ClickUp as a makeshift CRM. I use ClickUp for my SOPs and processes. I use ClickUp for team management and onboarding and training. I use ClickUp for the actual topic of my online course. So I'm teaching people how to use ClickUp. I also use ClickUp as the kind of client portal or service delivery method for my clients who are actually doing ClickUp implementation with me. And I probably use it for, I also use it for personal life. So we are renovating our house. And so ClickUp is managing our home renovation. ClickUp is also managing my household routines. I'm sure I'm missing some, but I'm using a lot of things with ClickUp.
But your life basically exists on ClickUp. If ClickUp doesn't hold it, you're not doing it.
Most likely, yeah. If ClickUp doesn't tell me to do it, I'm not going to even remember where it's at.
Yeah, I have a very similar strategy with ClickUp where everything's in there, and if it's not in there, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I should be clear, like I am managing everything in ClickUp. I still have outside databases that I use because I just think ClickUp gets a little slow for that. So like I might sometimes have a task that says go to X database and work on stuff, but it's all being managed in ClickUp.
Okay. So let's kind of start at the beginning of that customer process. You said you're using ClickUp templates as lead magnets, as opt-ins. And also kind of as the main topic for your YouTube channel. So talk to me a little bit about how you're using ClickUp in your marketing.
Yeah, so I think my business is it's very much got a process focus. And so process lends itself really well to checklists. And even before I started specializing in working with people who were also using ClickUp, I was talking about, here's a process for this, here's a process for that. And so when it came to opt-ins, my natural inclination was, a great opt-in would be a checklist for this or a process for that, that kind of thing. And when I narrowed it down to working just with ClickUp users, life became a lot easier because I could just take a template that I had already created either for internal use or to give to clients, and then I just kind of polished it up a little bit, made sure there weren't any typos, and I published it to my website as an opt-in. And when it came to the YouTube videos, very similar story. I was creating ClickUp-based assets for my clients or for my team where we needed to do something. And at a certain point, I was like, oh, well, if I just kind of censor this a little bit, I can just publish it to the whole world. And that's pretty much the whole story behind how my YouTube channel got started.
Yeah, and I send people to your YouTube channel all the time because everybody's asking me questions and I'm like, no, I don't want to answer that. I'm pretty sure Layla already did. Just go watch her YouTube channel.
That is very much the intent because you find when you're starting to work with the same tools, the same questions are asked again and again. And so I'm not great with the long emails. So having a short video link, much better.
Yeah. And I personally love having it as a resource to point people to because then I don't have to do it.
I actually just created it for you, Susan.
I know. I really appreciate it. It's really helped me out. So you are also using ClickUp as kind of a value add in your one-on-one services. Talk to me a little bit about how you use ClickUp with your one-on-one clients.
Oh my gosh. Everything lives in ClickUp for me. And I think there's so many different angles I could take on this. At the beginning, when I was still working with a variety of tools, I used ClickUp as kind of our client portal, client communication method. I know some people use Slack or Trello boards or email. I was using ClickUp very early. And I mean, that has its own challenges because ClickUp isn't always the easiest tool for guests, but I was using ClickUp to just kind of manage the whole service process. So we'd have dashboards to kind of manage the project. We'd be chatting directly through ClickUp. And basically the boundary that was set pretty early on is that I'm terrible at email, please use ClickUp. And so I was amazed by when I really clearly articulated that boundary. Clients started using ClickUp and they found that, wow, it's so much faster to be able to chat and send video clips back and forth. And now that's the main way I, manage our projects between meetings and sessions, and also handling support is all through that ClickUp, kind of ClickUp chat.
So talk to me a little bit more about how you got people to buy into that. So you set these really firm boundaries. Did you do training for them as they came on board? Like, what did the process look like to transition folks and their primary discussions from email and meetings into ClickUp? Because I think this is a piece that a lot of folks don't necessarily think about using their project management tool in that way. And it's one of my very favorite uses of the project management tool, especially if you are working remotely, to be able to have the whole conversation in one place. And that makes sense to people with teams, but I think sometimes it does not make sense to people working with clients that way. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you kind of evolved into that?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So at first it was very much just reminding them. Sheer force of will is what got people out of my inbox and out of, even phone calls at times where people just really needed to be trained. How I got them comfortable using ClickUp. I mean, I'm fortunate in that ClickUp training is now a big part of what I do. So I kind of had some skills in this area. But at first, the way I handled it was kind of a video tour, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The idea of kind of a Loom talk through of here's where you go for this and here's where you go for that. And at first, I was giving people very simplified areas. They were guests in my ClickUp account with very simplistic views. They saw one list, one dashboard, and that's it. In that dashboard area, we also had some kind of collective resources that all clients had access to. So it really was this kind of almost course-like kind of vault of resources and then your own private work area. The way I got people to actually use it was persistence, I think. We would, we would message through the chat in there. I'd even be sending tips on how to use ClickUp throughout our project. So naturally, after doing that for a while, it made sense to start specializing in the actual setup of ClickUp as the project, because we were doing so much ClickUp training anyway. I guess to better answer your actual question about the digital collaboration piece, we're just wrapping up now a larger project with a larger team. And the way that project is running is that we have, sessions every other week to kind of work on different things that need to be discussed in person. But between the sessions, all of the work, all of the iteration, all of the tailoring of pieces of the ClickUp puzzle, because as you know, it's very personal to one person. Each person can see something different. And we're doing that entirely through the chat and collaboration features. And when I announced that at one of the first sessions, I said, all right, guys, we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. But between now and then, the whole spiel. And someone, actually the tech person, spoke up and said, I don't know if we can do that. I think we might need to schedule a meeting for next week because I don't know if we can handle just chatting about this. And I said, oh, just you wait and see. and I won him over eventually. But I think that just doing it helps people see, oh, wow, sending video clips and sending chat, like that does work. That is communication. It's just different than what we might be used to.
Yeah, and I think it is a way of communicating that, if you can embrace it, can really be very powerful in a remote environment where you're trying to make things happen asynchronously. Maybe you're in different time zones, stuff is happening, your team is all working at different times. I've just seen it be such a game changer for internal and external communication. So I love that that's just a big part of your one-on-one services.
Yeah, and I would add to that, sometimes moving to async is really helped by using something like ClickUp, because I've had a lot of teams who are meeting crazy and then they go to work remote because of COVID or something else. And getting them into like a ClickUp dashboard where people each post their update every week into a chat widget that they all share with a shared template that basically mirrors a Scrum template. I mean, all of a sudden we're making this we're replacing the need for a 30-minute Scrum by having a chat widget. It's really convenient for the teams, like you said, that are working in different time zones or, have life going on or don't want to be on more Zoom calls.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, right? You have no idea.
No, I love that. Okay, so we've done marketing one-on-one, and now you're creating this whole community group learning experience around helping folks use ClickUp. So how did that evolve, and how are you actually using ClickUp there?
Yeah, so I think it's a natural progression of where I went with YouTube. So a year ago, I was exclusively doing one-on-one services. I was no diversification at all in Process Driven. And I started putting things on YouTube because I was like, well, if I post it on YouTube, I can send the link to future clients and not have to, I wasn't worried about SEO, any of that. Just, I don't want to answer these questions again. And after doing that for a while, YouTube's channel started to pick up. And I got a lot of emails coming in from people who just wanted almost like just a roadmap for how to navigate the YouTube videos. So I made a playlist, but they wanted more than that because they're like, well, I'm just, this particular problem is what I'm trying to solve. It's about collaboration. It's, and you hear enough of those things and you kind of see the lines connecting them. And eventually I realized, if I really want to put more energy behind this, I can't exclusively do this in the evenings after my one-on-one client work. So I started thinking about how to make it more of an actual content offer. And the community came up because I realized that the best way to learn ClickUp is by using it and asking questions. It's, as you've probably experienced, it's a really iterative process. It's really, curiosity driven. And that's at least how I implement it even. It's not like we're going to set it up correctly and you'll never touch it again. It's, you learn by seeing how other people doing it. Say, ooh, that's cool. I'm going to steal that little piece and change a little, whatever. So I really wanted to have something where people were interacting, not just with me, but they also had a roadmap or a path that they could follow so they didn't feel like they were just going down the YouTube rabbit holes. And so Clicking Up, started. And the name Clicking Up is kind of speaking to that whole iteration, like ClickUp is a verb. I'm not as good at naming as you are, Susan, so I couldn't be that creative.
Awful at naming. I hate naming things.
I totally disagree.
Oh, it's always such a horrible internal process where you're just like, I have no idea what to name this thing. So I think you are perfect at naming things.
Yeah, ING. That was as creative as I could get. So I was like, I'm gonna, gerund this baby, and and that's what I actually just released it. It just went live yesterday after pre-selling and all that we had a whole wait list to kind of prove it was a good idea, pre-sell to make sure, like, again, people were interested. And then it just went live yesterday. So I'm kind of, at the time of filming here, I'm excited. People are now just getting into it. I'm getting the feedback, and it's an exciting week.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. So we've done client stuff, marketing, and you're also using ClickUp internally as kind of the main hub of process-driven operations, your operations. So talk to me a little bit about how you use process-driven to manage internal operations, manage your team, manage your own stuff.
Yeah. So actually, and I should back up first and answer, I realized I never answered your last question. I actually originally was going to launch ClickingUp using ClickUp as the delivery platform. And I just want to clarify the fact that I tried it, and it was so crazy collaborative that I was like, this is never going to work. Actually, my one-on-one services for a time actually had a course-like framework as the back-end kind of support of the one-on-one service. It was just so crazy. So we ended up moving away from it into MemberVault, just to give you the tech stack on that one.
It is so interesting because I also thought about running my group program inside ClickUp. And yeah, I was just like, I can't, like, it's
the iteration was so hard.
Yeah, yes, like I needed a structure around the curriculum, and that, yeah, it needed to be a little, I don't even like saying less collaborative, but it needed to be a little bit less collaborative, a little bit more structured.
I love janky setups, but that was too janky.
Exactly. So you also, I think, may have won me over on MemberVault. I've been going back and forth on course platforms, and I think I love them.
Yeah. MemberVault has impressed me so much in the actual team and the community. Their Facebook group is, it is par none. It is absolutely, the platform itself, not the most beautiful, but I really liked it because it had a one-click login link that you could create, so people didn't need to remember a password and email. And that link could then be embedded into ClickUp. So, bringing it all back.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think I've been going back and forth, and I just like the functionality and the flexibility of how you can interact with the people in your courses. And I think that is really unusual. Most of the course platforms are like, you can load this resource, and then they have to move through the course this way. And I like that MemberVault is really flexible in how you can interact with the people going through your courses to make it more interactive.
Yeah.
So
it's really nice. And I'm sorry, I completely derailed from your actual question.
I mean, we're talking about no code. This is, it's a no code platform that we're using that actually I think very few people are talking about because it's kind of new.
It is.
And it's a little bit of a dark horse in the course platform community.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have a lot of funding behind it. So there just seem to be quieter. But once you're plugged in, it's like, oh, wow. How did I not know? It feels like a mom and pop course platform. And I don't even know if I didn't know that was a possible thing, but it's a thing.
It's a thing. Okay.
So your actual question was what?
Was talking about how you're using ClickUp internally as kind of your main hub of internal operations.
Yeah. So every single thing that needs to be done in my business lives in ClickUp. ClickUp, I know we've talked about before, I think back in the last episode where I was on with Marie, is like ClickUp is the place where process can live. One of the catchphrases or kind of ways I explain what I do is that I help people turn ClickUp into their business instruction manual. And I would say that for myself, that's very much, what's happening in ClickUp. It's where we're doing our weekly scrums or our meetings. It's where we're keeping track of all of our processes. But most importantly, every single task that's in there, whether it's one time or recurring, it has a process attached to it. And if it doesn't have a process, it has a task saying create the process for it. But that is I know no one likes documentation, but it's one of my absolute favorite things to do. So I know it sounds weird, but this morning I was just working on, documenting the process for these email reminders that we have going out for office hours that happen in ClickingUp. And I was like, documenting the process of doing it. And I was just like, this is so great. And I just attach that SOP onto the task, make it recur, and then I can delegate it. And that's what ClickUp is to me. And I think that's the best use case for ClickUp.
I love that. Is it worth it? Every small business owner wants to know that the money they spend on their businesses is worth it, that their investments produce results and help them grow. But if you don't know your business finances in and out, it's hard to know whether those expenses and investments are really worth it. Plenty of business owners, even the successful ones, feel like they're shooting in the dark when it comes to how they spend, save, and invest their money. Like you, they wonder if the ads they're buying, the software they're investing in, or the people they're paying are really paying off. And that's stressful. Feeling unsure about how you're spending or investing your money might be common, but it sure isn't fun. I want something different for you. I want you to feel confident that every decision you make is guided by your financial intel. I want you to be able to decide what actions to take to grow your business from a place of confidence and purpose, not panic, so that you can feel masterful at managing your money instead of inept or just plain scared. I want you to know exactly what's working so you can go all in and make your money make more money. This is what I do for business owners when I step in as their chief financial officer on demand. I help them parse the numbers, look for opportunities, and invest where it counts. We get clear on where they're getting in their own way and where the math just doesn't add up. And now I want to teach you to do the same for your own business, because trust me, you can. Join me for Think Like a CFO. It's a 4-month accelerator, online workshop, and small group coaching program where I'll work alongside you so you can start thinking like a CFO and know that every penny you spend on your business is worth it. You'll dig into your relationship to money, put your financial data at your fingertips, and build systems of cash flow, taxes, and budgeting. I'll help you integrate your financial knowledge into your operational systems and technology so that your whole business works better. And by the end, you'll feel wildly capable with your money. Think Like a CFO is starting soon, so go to scalespark.co/CFO to get all the information and sign up. I can't wait to work with you. So talk to me a little bit about the impact that going all in on this one no-code tool has had on your business. I mean, you're using it in so many different ways, but you really committed to say, this is a tool, it's very flexible, I can use it in a lot of different ways. How many different ways can I figure out how to use this? And how can I go all in? So talk to me a little bit about the impact that's had on your business.
Yeah, I think the reason I went all in, and I was resistant to it for years. I was using ClickUp internally, but I didn't want to, be like the ClickUp person. The reason I went all in was more so not even from an operations perspective, but just as an efficiency thing. I was keeping up on so many tools, and as you probably know, those rabbit holes are deep and wide and
time consuming.
Oh my gosh, so time consuming. And I just found that if I could just dig into one, what is it? I'm trying to remember the phrase. There's a TED Talk. Okay, sidetrack. There is a TED Talk that I heard on the radio at some point, and it was talking about this woman who invents useless things. Maybe you've seen her YouTube channel. I wish I knew her name. Oh, it's so fun. Another YouTube rabbit hole to go down. But she opens up her talk by saying something along the lines of, the best way to become the master in your field is to pick a very, very small field. And so I kind of took that approach to when it came to like process consulting. I figured if I could really narrow in on a certain type of vehicle, it would be a lot easier to master it, which is kind of just common sense. And surely enough, it has been. I would say that the narrowing really helped the most from a marketing and positioning perspective, because before that, I felt very general. But when you think about ClickUp and Process or ClickUp and Business Instruction Manual, we've narrowed it down so far that usually the people who come to me have a very clear idea of what I do, which was the biggest challenge for the first, 3-ish years.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked a little bit behind the scenes about how difficult it is for folks who do systems to translate that to something that not system people understand who's the right choice at a specific point. So all of us internally who do very similar things that are actually not at all the same thing seem very similar to people who are not in our brains.
Oh my gosh. And it's so hard because, I bet a lot of systems people could do ClickUp stuff. I'm sure I could set up, Member Vault, who knows? But it's just trying to, that position question, it's, you know, it's separating capabilities from competencies and trying to really just, you know, own your area.
Yeah. And I mean, with a platform like ClickUp where they're iterating so quickly and there's so many new features coming out every week, and trying to stay up to date just on that one platform is a lot. Much less trying to figure out all the different ways you could harness what they've just released, because every time they come out with something, I'm like, I can think of 10 different ways I could use this. How am I going to practice all of those things and figure out if that might work there or over here? And so, yeah, I could see where being really specific about the software that you are implementing and using and the ways that you're executing can be efficient internally and also a really solid marketing position. Because, yeah, you're the ClickUp person where I'm like, hey, you need to learn ClickUp. You need to go talk to Layla because... she's your person.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. It was like one of those weird things because I was very lucky in that my timing lined up with ClickUp getting, you know, a round of investing, which you probably, or investment, as you probably saw, and just like things were moving in my favor. I was like, oh my gosh, I went from like kind of no name systems person to like small name systems person in very short order, thanks to just, you know, the way that the timing, the cookie crumb. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and like their ability to share templates was a very, like, that was really a game changer, I think, because if you can't, like, one of the things that was always frustrating for me as I do ClickUp implementations is how do I take all of the stuff that I've built and not have to then go rebuild it other places, and being able to share that with people that, you know, when they ask a question and they're like, oh, how do you do this? You could just be like, oh, well, here, you can just have my template. Like,
true.
It's easier than me explaining it to you. Just here you go.
Yeah.
And I think until they had gotten to that point, like, I think that was really a challenge.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's sometimes hard about that, though, which is like the flip side of public templates, is people overemphasize the importance of the templates or the structure in general. For sure. Like we were talking about right before this, how, you know, your structure is really sophisticated and all this stuff, and trying to explain it took, you know, a while to talk through and give the tour of the logic behind it. And I think like one of the big things I've been emphasizing at ClickUp, which I didn't realize was such a central belief for me, but, you know, when you start making a course, you're like, become very self-aware of your own, your own approach. You know all too well what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I was really realizing that one of my, you know, cornerstones is the fact that people freak out about the importance of structure when really it's the strategy, which we've talked about before, your process and your strategy, which is way outside of the technology that actually matters. It does not matter that much, you know, what your list is and what your folder is and what your status is. We get so hung up on these things, but it's really, it adds like 20% of the value, and the other 80% is just knowing what the heck you're doing to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I always like templates as a place to start or a place to see how somebody else's brain works. You know, before we got on this call, we were talking about me trying to explain my ClickUp to a new team member, and the fact that I don't actually have anybody inside my ClickUp really, other than my podcast producer up to this point. And so it really is an extension of how my brain works, and that changes. Like, because there's nobody else in my ClickUp, I don't have any constraints on changing how my brain works. If they release a new feature, I can completely change how everything's organized in there so that it matches how my brain thinks about things and how I want to plan out my strategy or my tasks, because it doesn't impact anything. And I think that's a really different way of using it than I would have to if I had, you know, regular team members that needed a more consistent structure. You know, I think there's a lot of interplay between the strategy that goes into a consensus model where everybody has to kind of agree to how it's structured versus, you know, in my brain when I'm like, oh, I want to plan out something new, or I've got a new project and I'm going to just reorder how everything happens. Or a couple of weeks ago, I went in and added emojis to everything so that the visual representation showed up differently. And trying to explain that to someone was really... I sent her a 17-minute Loom video and I was like, I'm sorry, this is so long.
You know, but that's so... I think that's just... What a great way of putting it, because I never realized it until you said this. But when we're building a ClickUp for a team, that's the hardest thing, is because oftentimes the business owner is championing it, or maybe it's the IT director, but most often it's the business owner with my size client. And there's such a force of will that person brings in because they're used to designing the entire business. that until you said that, I don't know if I would have been able to articulate it this way, but we almost need to like shake up the power structure and make it a consensus build out. And oftentimes, yeah, that's just interesting. It's one of those things that, which is what makes project management tools, I would argue, the hardest type of tool to set up.
Absolutely. 100%. It is the hardest type of tool, especially on something flexible like ClickUp or Notion, where there's not necessarily like a real, yes, there's a structure, but the way the structure is set up, you can use it in a million different ways. I think trying to figure out the best strategy to even start can sometimes really be the hurdle that keeps people from getting it set up. And I think that's the cool part about no code tools, but also kind of the intimidating factor is because so much of it is in the strategy. And I always think it's interesting that when people are like, oh, you use ClickUp, can I see your ClickUp? I'm like, yeah, but also it's not at all the way that I would think that you should set your, like, yes, I'll show you, but it is in no way the way that you should be using ClickUp or setting this up. If you have, you business owner with team of 5, you might get some stuff out of how I'm using it and cool things that I've decided to implement, but that's going to be really different than how I implement ClickUp for clients or how, Joe Schmo down the street should implement ClickUp for his business.
Absolutely.
So,
it's funny, even if you're working with the same type of client, I know there's a lot of, ClickUp specialists that are specializing in an industry right now, and they kind of have a way that they set it up, like, more or less a space template. This is how your client should be organized. I find that so challenging because even in the same industry, a similar size business, depending on your strategy and how, what you're trying to manage within ClickUp, or maybe, collecting, it's like the difference between automating actions and automating instructions. But depending on what you're putting in ClickUp, it's going to look entirely different. I think I've built,
like your values and how your team thinks and how you work with your team. Even if you're in this, I worked with agencies. That's a pretty specific niche. And also every single one is very different.
Absolutely. And it sounds like we're overcomplicating it. You know how like the person who like makes bread is like, there's so much to the science of it. And the rest of us are like, I just like bread. I'm sure there's people listening who are like, yeah, it's just a task tool. But it really, you'll notice it as you start using it. If you peek inside someone else in your industry or a peer, that's what's so fun about the community is you can, you get to literally peek.
Yeah, peek at people's brains. Like that's, you are seeing how people's brains work.
Or their collective
brain. Look at
my
ClickUp. Yeah, you see exactly how my brain is thinking and what I care about right now. And, what projects are overlapping and how my brain works. Like I like having emojis that mean things and colors that mean things. And
yeah, just the difference between a list and a task, how spread out do you like to think about things? That says a lot about a person, which I know clients hate when I say that, but I'm like, there's 2 ways to do it. And they're like, just tell me which one. Just tell me, eventually
tell me what the best practice is. Like that is maybe my least favorite question, but also the most common question is just tell me what the best practice is and we'll just do that. And my answer is always like, well, there isn't. Like that's the point, is that there isn't a best practice and that it can be really flexible and really customized to how you get it. But I've also been like, for me, I've been customizing my ClickUp for 2 years. It didn't start out that way. It started out as a list of things that I had to do.
Which is where I think everyone just needs to start. Just use it as a nice to-do list, and then everything kind of, I know it's a very like woo-woo way of going, but just it organically follows from there. You're like,
does. It evolves.
I had a few, I receive consults that come in, and whenever people say like, I want to set it up right the first time, I understand why they say that, but it's such a red flag for me. I'm like, I am an iteration shop here. That's how you're going to end up liking what you get. It's so hard to see people.
I'm the same, where I'm like, okay, yes. So I come from a background of data. So I come at it from kind of a different perspective where I'm like, the data behind the scenes needs to be organized the quote unquote right way to be able to answer the questions that you want to answer. So like when I'm doing financial data stuff,
so true.
Like I come to people's finances from a very different place than most accountants, because I'm saying, cool, how can we organize this to answer the questions we need it to answer? And in that sense, you totally need to be thinking about that when you are setting up your data structure so that you can report on it in a way that makes sense. Like that part of the setup, I'm like, yeah, you totally need to set it up the right way, because if you don't collect data or you don't think about the data and think about how you want to use the data on the, 6 months from now, when you want to answer the question about did this thing work, or where are my clients coming from? Like, you have to have set up the data structure to be able to answer those questions. But like you, I'm very iterative. So I'm like, we'll come up with that and start the structure the right way. But also, when I give you data and you start having reports, all that does is prompt more questions that we then go add more data collection to answer more. Like it is an evolution, and it always ends up being like, I mean, I've been doing business intelligence stuff for almost 20 years now. Like it always works that way. I give you a little bit of data and it prompts questions about, okay, now what about this? So it's it's always evolving. And I feel you. I went on a data rant.
Oh, no, it's so true, though, because I think that's been my big, again, like, I think you said it so much better than I could, but just the idea of like going in with the expectation that the first draft is not going to be perfect. I think there's a false assumption that ClickUp is like web design, where it's like, I just want it to be beautiful and I can just hand it to somebody and it'll come back beautiful and I'll get more clients because of it. But that's not how it works. Because
I mean, that's not how web design works either.
That's true. I guess there's iteration to that as well. But I like to think that web design, you could outsource it and it doesn't really involve as much of your brain as there's maybe I'm oversimplifying web design. But you know what I'm saying? Where ClickUp is like getting your brain out of your brain for maybe the first time, versus web design is like so hard. More outside of yourself.
There is an emotional side for business owners that are doing it this first time, where it's the first time they've really had to when you are implementing a project management tool, which is why I think it's probably one of the hardest ones to set up, is that this is the first time where you have had to try and explain to somebody how your brain works. And that is a really difficult process. Like to get outside of your brain to observe what your decision-making process is, and then be able to not just observe it, but explain that to somebody in a way that they understand it, and that other people can then use your decisions, use your brain. Man, there's a lot of emotions tied to that for business owners.
Oh my gosh. And I feel like two tools that have helped, just in case anyone's listening is also in the same industry as, doing this kind of work. Two things that have helped me on that front is, one, process mapping as an art, not a science. I think you also do it a little bit of this, like just kind of building out the structure of things visually. Oh my gosh. I could not.
I can't. Yeah. It has to be like a mind mappy kind of thing. I can't do system design where people are like, oh, just list this thing and list this thing. I'm like, no, I have to see the connections.
Absolutely. And that is, I use that for business workflows, but also just the things that they're keeping track of. Like each process before it goes into ClickUp, it is a map, because otherwise, it's funny. I have them create the map as prep work a lot of the time, and we'll come together to talk through it. And each time I have questions like, you just jump from this step to this step. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. We do these 15 things in between them.
Because like you get so used to following the same path, because even if you don't think you have a process, you do. Like no matter what, there's something in your brain that says, here's the next thing that I do. But trying to observe that is such a challenge. And it does take somebody else going, well, that doesn't make any sense, for you to be like, oh, you're right. It doesn't. There's other stuff happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest reasons I've moved away from doing like quick implementations of things, because it takes that time and repetition. I was actually going to say that's the second thing that's helped cement this kind of iterative approach is in my project plans, even, which we usually use ClickUp, go figure, to manage the actual project steps. I list out that this is when we're going to do the first draft. Like I treat it more like a creative asset where we have got draft 1, revision 1, draft 2, that kind of thing.
I love that approach.
I think that helps. Yeah, it changes the mindset from thinking that this is like a custom development that's going to be right the first time to, oh, this is a process. Go figure.
Yeah, I love that approach, because to me, and I think we approach this very similarly, like there is an art to this. Like this is the way we are creative is with systems and system design and process design. And a lot of people don't think about it that way, but it's an art. So I love the idea of really leaning into that, in just saying that, like, this is a draft. This is art that we are creating together through this process.
Yeah, it sounds so hippy dippy, but I watch a lot of, like,
it's not wrong.
Yeah. No, it's so collaborative. And, like, I think that ties into the human element, which is probably the hardest part of all this, and why project management is so hard, is that external brain. But you've got all of these humans who you have to keep on the same page. You have to help them feel like their voice is being heard in, like, the Leviathan that you're building. And I think framing it as a creative, collaborative, artistic thing, I mean, that's the part that I love, but also the part that I think a lot of folks, when they're looking from the outside at the work that you and I do, like, systems folks seem dry and technical and yes, no binaries, when really it's this creative endeavor.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So is there anything you think we should talk about that we haven't touched on yet? You know, we could talk about ClickUp for weeks at a time.
Days. Weeks. I'm trying to think. I guess the biggest things that I've been, pondering for myself lately is thinking about, the imperfections of no code. I think we glorify no code as like, wow, it's so much easier. It's so much more accessible. But with it, we are so limited in some ways by the choices of developers that we can't really have access to.
Yes.
I think that's been something that I've been running into, especially with larger teams who are going through implementations. They're like, why doesn't this work? And I'm like, well, it's just not an option that's available in the drop down, that kind of stuff.
Yes. I love that perspective. Right before, we were talking about how I really want to use the integrations to be able to customize custom fields in ClickUp, to be able to enter data in there. And it's not an option that exists in Zapier yet. A lot of these things, if you're patient enough, maybe it'll come, but there is that inherent limitation of the choices that people are making that aren't using the software the same way you are, or aren't trying to use software the same way you are. And I think we talked about this in the last episode about how ClickUp is great, and also it's not designed for service businesses necessarily, because the people that are developing it are developing it and thinking like a software company. So they think in sprints, and so the sprint feature was one that they were really excited about, and one like getting the GitHub integration to make their work easier. And they are going to prioritize design and development choices that make their work easier, not necessarily thinking about how you as an individual want to use the software. And it'll probably come eventually, but it's not a priority for them.
So true. And that's what's hard about no code that is general and not, niche down by industry, is because we have that. If there's no niching by industry, I think across the board, you pretty much see everything specializing to serve the company that's creating it. So whatever that story is, whether they're a web designer who started this web design SaaS tool, well, everything is tailored, with that bias. And if you look at like ClickUp's team, I do a lot of stalking of ClickUp just to, keep up on what's happening. Like the team that they have, the team members even that are coming into the product team, they've got, they've been working at SaaS companies their entire careers. So what perspective is that going to bring to weighting which issues get chosen? That's going to play an important role. And I think we can be loud and outspoken, and ClickUp particularly does a nice job with their candy board to allow you to kind of vote on features. But I think that loss of control can be really a hard adjustment. It's kind of like the Android versus iPhone thing, not being able to, change the, SD card or whatever it might be. ClickUp and no code tools in general, it's a closed box in some ways that give you limited functionality in these certain use cases that we can kind of build and expand on by being creative, but it's a different kind of creativity than creating something from scratch. And I think that's something hard for people to adjust to, especially if they're used to having things, custom developed for them in a coded environment.
Yeah, and absolutely, there's a real trade-off there. You're paying a lot less to access really functional software. You don't have to pay to do the custom development, but you are limited by choices that people who are not you are making about what you can do. And it's it is so interesting to watch the biases. And it's one of the reasons that when I talk about how I evaluate software, I evaluate whether or not a software tool has a public roadmap, or, do they allow their users to vote on features and talk about how they're using it, and are they responsive to that, and is their customer service responsive? Because a lot of that has a big impact on how you can interact with that tool, and how much you'll like the tool, how much your users will like the tool. And I think a lot of that has to do with those constraints and being able to operate within them, or be patient enough for them to develop whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, especially if you're among the minority in terms of who, if you're the only roofer using ClickUp, you're probably going to be, screaming or working at an uphill battle to try to get the mobile app improved. But it's just like hoping there's a big enough demographic that's pushing for the change that you're looking for to make, the folks in the development wing able to hear you, which probably ties in a lot to some of the broader conversations we're having about big tech right now.
For sure.
just that little nugget there.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. So where can our listeners find you if they want to connect or learn more about what you do, or about ClickUp?
Yeah, or about ClickUp. The best place to find me is probably on YouTube. So you can look up my name, Layla Pomper, on YouTube, and you will see a ton of YouTube tutorials. I also have a Facebook group if you're more of a Facebooker, and my website is processdriven.co. So you can find all that stuff probably on that website, and it'll take you to the right spot.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Layla. I always love it when we get to just geek out, especially about something that we both love so much.
Likewise, Susan. Thanks so much for having me.
Over the course of this series on no-code software tools, we've covered a lot of different ways you could conceivably use these tools to make your business better. You can use them to streamline your workflow, enhance your client communication, and build that relationship. You can use them to help your students learn more effectively. Building no-code products or resources can diversify your income. You can even use them as marketing tools, as operations manuals, and as the foundation of your business operations. No-code software tools make it easier and cheaper than it's ever been to run a really effective, lean, profitable business. It's the way Layla and I both run pretty big businesses with pretty small teams and at a low cost. If there was one thing I had to point to in companies that routinely punch above their weight when it comes to revenue versus expenses, it's that they're really effectively using their resources. And most often that comes from understanding and harnessing technology like no-code tools effectively. Next week, we're kicking off a theme talking all about managing change, personally, professionally, and with your team. So hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player so you don't miss it. Break the Ceiling is produced by Yellow House Media. Our executive producer is Sean McMullen. Production coordinator is Lou Blazer. This episode is edited by Marty Seefeld with production assistance by Kristen Rudnick.